Yeah.
But when you met Leila, I remember you guys got married not because you guys were in love.
Yeah.
It was like a business transaction. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we talk about it a lot because I think I like our dynamic a lot. And it's not normal because most people, and every relationship I had prior to this, it was like, you meet somebody, you feel some chemistry, and then it gets hot and heavy really quickly.
Yeah.
And then it starts to cool down a little bit. And then you kind of like get into this cruise zone. And then you look up and you're like, you know, we actually don't have a lot of things that we're in common besides the fact that we're opposite, which is why we attracted to begin with. But like, we're opposite. Like you like, you know, you vote for this guy, I vote for this guy. You know, you like these things, I like these things. Like it's just so many differences. And so we had a different experience where like we went on our first date and we ended up talking about business for 4 hours. And I was like, cool. And I didn't like have any romantic anything, but I was like, she's cool. And so I felt myself kind of just like wanting to see her again. So I was like, hey, I mean, I remember the next day I was like, hey, I'm working all day. Want to come work with me? Like it wasn't a date. I was like, I'm just going to be working at my place or at the library or whatever. And she said, sure. And so then she just like hung out with me and then we just both worked together after that. And that was kind of like the theme of how, like the vibe of how things started is like, whatever I was doing, I'd just rather do it with her. And so it was much more companionate, rather than like love, like capital L, you know what I mean? Love relationship. But then I think the shared mission and shared values of like, this is what I want to do with my life. She's like, me too. I want to do big shit. And like up to that point, I had definitely dated people who wanted to do big things, but like the types of big things they wanted to do were different than the types of things I wanted to do. And so we weren't mission aligned. And so and I think that, you know, probably you feel this way too. Like when you want to do big things, like it's rare air. Like not a lot of people breathe that air. And what you have to go through to get there is hard. And I knew that where I wanted to go, not a lot of people would be able to hang. And that might be from childhood, from whatever, you know what I mean? Whatever it is. But like, I just knew that I was willing to go through a lot of suffering to get there. And she was too. And that was, and like there were a couple, I'll tell you the two key moments in our relationship that did it for me. But the first one was when I lost everything, the second time for me, the first time for her. When I lost everything, I kind of sat her down. I was like, hey, like, we're cool. Like, if you leave right now, like, all respect, like, I won't blame you. I will, like, we're cool. Yeah. And she was like, no, I'm here. She's like, if I have to sleep with you under a bridge, I will. And I remember being like, man, that's awesome. Like, that's really cool that she just like was there, even though I gave her like an out card. And then the second time was we really needed this money to come in. And I said, listen, like I have to just sell my ass off at this location, and you need to go to this gym in Hawaii and you need to crush it. Cause it cost like 10 grand for her to get there. And it was like about the last 10 grand I had. And she needed to do 100,000 in net sales, cash collected in 30 days in order for us to like cover all these bills that were coming in from these other directions. And right before she left, we like took a break because I was like, I was just too stressed out of all these different things that were going on. And she flew out there and she killed it. And she didn't have to. She wasn't technically associated with me anymore. And she could have just left and be like, I'm just going to go back and just do my own thing, whatever. And then when most people would crumble, she just like stood tall and got harder. And that was when I was like, she can go through everything that I can go through. And so it was like those two instances is when I knew that like that she was going to be the person who was going to come with me to where I wanted to go.
Do you feel like you have to get to that darkest moment to become somebody really successful? So like you're really successful. I see you guys, especially with the age, you guys have done a lot. But like in the beginning, I know that there's a lot of times where, like you said, you don't want to live anymore. Yeah. You're really stressed out, and you get down to your last penny. Yeah. Do you think that's important for somebody to go through that and come back up to really make it, or be in a position where they're going to continue to make it? You think you could have done it differently without having to go through all that pain?
Yes and no. So I don't think that suffering is a requisite for success, but I do think that it is very likely. And I think that what it does is it gives us evidence. Like when you get into hard times, it doesn't change who you are. It gives you evidence of who you are. It displays, it demonstrates who you are. So some people are like, you know, when when the going gets tough, the tough get, the whatever the saying is. But I think that a lot of times it just reveals our character. It doesn't necessarily create it, because it might have already been there that whole time, and then we just get the environment in which to prove it to ourselves. Yeah. But I think it goes from the man with the opinion to the man with the experience, which L.H. Hardwick said, no man with an experience is ever at the mercy of a man with an opinion. And so like somebody could be like, oh man, like 2008 wasn't that bad. Like somebody who's younger, hasn't gone through it, but like man with an opinion, man with an experience who went through it, he's never at that guy's mercy. And so like there's some like soul hardness that I think comes through that, because you have evidence in your past of like, I have been through worse. That being said, I think that you can extrapolate any negative experience to give yourself a shield against any new negative. So it's like, I'll give you a different example. So let's say you're new to business, which a lot of people maybe listening to this are. Yeah. But you might have had a tough upbringing, which a lot of people listening to this probably have, right? Because a lot of people suffer because we're kids, right? If you think to yourself like, man, like none of this is nearly as bad as my dad whooping the shit out of me, all of a sudden it just gives you a very different context of what hard feels like, right? Or mom or whatever it is, right? And so, or my brother, it doesn't matter who it is, but the point is like we've gone through hard shit, and I think that what hard feels like is the same, whether it's a business hard or an emotional hard, it feels the same. And so I think if you can take these past experiences that are hard before and extrapolate them onto your current situation, you realize you've been through so much more than this. And then you can look back and say like, to use the Morpheus quote from The Matrix, like, I stand here truthfully unafraid, not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. Yeah. And so I think that those hard times give us evidence of who we are. Yeah. And I think it's the stories that we tell ourselves that create, the futures we're going to have.
Now, Alex, what do you think if you wouldn't have met Leila? Yeah. And maybe you meet Kyla or somebody else? Where do you think
Kayla, right?
Where do you think you are at this moment? Do you think you're as successful, less successful? Yeah. Because let me tell you something. The reason why I asked is because me and Syl are really different. Yeah. Like I'm like the visionary, the recruiter, the sales guy, and she's the operator. So she operates everything. Like if we have an event, like if she didn't have me, we wouldn't have any people. Yeah. But if I didn't have her, we would have people and we would lose all the people because I don't know how to operate, plan, organize. I'm horrible at that. So like my job is to bring in agents, and her job is to keep the agents. Yeah. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Totally. It's the same dynamic. Yeah. We have the identical dynamic between Leila and I.
But how does that work, and where do you think you would have been without Leila?
So of course, since Leila is in the background of the audience, I would be homeless under that bridge. That's what I would just be there, just without anything. No, but we actually have this conversation a lot. Like if I were not in her life, she would probably just find someone who's similar to me and find a complementary skill set. And like if she were not in my life, I would like the business requires these functions to occur. And whether it's mixed between me and Leila or Leila's because like we talk about like what if Alex dies? Because we think about like what happens after that. Same scenario. Well, she might have to find 2 or 3 people to do the functions that I'm doing. And so I probably can't find one Leila, but I might be able to find like 2 or 3 people who can fill the holes that she leaves to make sure that the functions get done. And so it's like, so Y Combinator has put out a lot of research on the fact that like 3 founders is the ideal amount of people for a business. And I think that just happens to be like, there are kind of buckets of activity that must occur in order for a business to be successful. And it's just more difficult for a single founder to do that on their own, where all the hats learn all the things, or find and incentivize someone who's good enough to be like owner level of give a shit. I don't know like the cussing words on this, but like, the owner level of give a shit in a company when it's early days. And so I think that's why it gets so hard for people to get going, because especially if you're a solo, you own 100%, et cetera. If it's just you, like we both have the advantage of 2 owners just right off the bat. And I remember when we were coming up and competing against other people, I always used to think like, even if I'm toe to toe with this guy, I was like, I've also got her and he doesn't. And I was like, it's 2-on-1. Yeah. Like with every business, competitive space I felt, I was like, it's 2-on-1. Like we always come to with an advantage. And so I think that if you can get that founding team in place of talented people who have complementary skill sets, and for anybody who's watching, like the 3 kind of big ones, and you alluded to it, was like you've got your acquisition side, which is the promoter who's going to bring people into the door. You've got the operation side, the product side, right? Which is how are we going to fulfill the promises we made on the front end, right? And then the third one keeps the other two out of jail, which is, HR, finance, legal, IT, taxes, accounting, all that stuff. And so those are kind of the three elements that we see within the business. You've got your product, you've got your acquisition, and then you've got all the stuff to keep yourself out of prison.
Guys, if you made it this far, I have an exclusive mastermind that I want you to join. Go to drivenacademy.com and subscribe to my exclusive mastermind where we're gonna meet in person every month at my workshop, and you get more perks. All you gotta do is go to the link below and sign up. I'll see you there.